In a fjord on Norway's western coast, a tunnel disappears straight into a mountain. No toll booth, no fanfare, no sign explaining what it cost. Just a clean opening in solid rock swallowing a two-lane road that emerges 15 kilometers later on the other side of the range. There are more than 1,000 of these tunnels in Norway. Some run beneath the sea floor. Some connect islands no one outside the country has ever heard of. One of them is the longest road tunnel on Earth, and almost no one talks about them. Because in Norway, the most expensive things are often the ones you barely notice. This is a country that holds the largest sovereign wealth fund in the world. Over $1.7 trillion. Roughly $320,000 set aside for every single citizen. And yet the cities look modest. The cars look ordinary. The clothes look practical. There are no gold towers, no skyline competitions, no visible attempt to impress anyone. Which raises a question that doesn't go away once you start asking it. What does wealth look like when a country decides it doesn't need to prove it? From the outside, Norway is often reduced to a postcard. Fjords, northern lights, maybe a Viking reference. But that version misses almost everything that actually defines the country. Because Norway is not just beautiful, it is engineered. Quietly, patiently, at a scale that becomes visible only when you start looking at what holds the country together. Roads carved through mountains that should have isolated entire regions. Bridges crossing fjords deep enough to hide a skyscraper. Subsea tunnels descending nearly 400 meters below the ocean. Trains that climb from sea level to high plateau in under an hour. Villages of a few hundred people connected to the national grid as if they were in the center of Oslo. This is not luck. It is a decision, a long, deliberate sequence of choices about what to do with a sudden, enormous fortune. Because Norway was not always wealthy. For most of its history, it was one of the poorer countries in Western Europe. Cold, remote, dependent on fishing and timber. Then, in 1969, something changed beneath the North Sea. And the country had to decide what kind of nation it wanted to become. What it chose is the reason Norway looks the way it does today. Not loud, not flashy, but structured down to the smallest detail. And to understand it, you have to start with the land itself. Because in Norway, geography did not just shape the country, it tested it. Chapter 1. A country built against its own geography. Look at Norway from above, and the first thing you notice is that the country shouldn't really work as a single nation. It is long. Extraordinarily long. If you rotated Norway around its southern tip, its northern edge would reach the coast of North Africa. The mainland alone stretches over 1,750 kilometers from south to north. But the coastline, once you account for every fjord, every inlet, every island, runs for more than 100,000 kilometers. That is more than twice the circumference of the Earth, and almost none of it is flat. The country is dominated by mountains, glaciers, plateaus, deep valleys carved by ice over millions of years. Roughly 3% of the land is suitable for farming. The rest is rock, forest, water, or snow. In most countries, this kind of terrain forces people into a few habitable corridors. Cities cluster, interior regions empty, distant villages slowly disappear. Norway refused that pattern. The choice was made early and made consciously. Population would not be allowed to collapse into the cities. Communities along the coast, in the valleys, and inside the Arctic Circle would remain connected, not abandoned, not folklorized, connected. But to do that, the country had to defeat its own geography. The fjords are the most visible example. Carved by glaciers during the last ice age, they push deep inland from the coast, sometimes more than 200 kilometers. Their walls rise vertically out of the water. Their depths can exceed 1,300 meters. For centuries, they were barriers. To cross from one side to the other meant a ferry, a long detour, or no journey at all. Today, that landscape is threaded with engineering. The Lærdal Tunnel runs for 24.5 kilometers through solid rock, the longest road tunnel in the world. To prevent driver fatigue inside it, engineers built 3 artificial caverns along the route, each lit in soft blue and yellow light to simulate sunrise. You enter a mountain, and inside it you pass through what feels like dawn 3 times. Then you emerge on the other side of the range. Further north, the Eiksund Tunnel descends to 287 meters below sea level, connecting island communities to the mainland. The Ryfast tunnel system near Stavanger goes deeper still, 292 meters under the seabed, the longest and deepest subsea road tunnel in the world. And then there is the Atlantic Road, a short stretch of coastline in western Norway where the road does not avoid the sea. It crosses it. 8 bridges connect a string of small islands and skerries, the largest of them curving so sharply that from certain angles it appears to launch directly into the sky. Storms pound it routinely. Waves break over the asphalt. The road absorbs it and continues. What makes all of this remarkable is not the engineering alone. It is the reasoning behind it. These projects do not connect major economic centers. They connect people. A village of 300, a fishing community on an island, a farming valley that in any other country would have been quietly written off. The cost per resident by any normal calculation makes no sense, but Norway treats infrastructure as a form of citizenship. If you live in the country, you are part of the country. The geography does not get to decide otherwise. And once you understand that, you start to see the pattern everywhere. In the ferries that run on schedule to islands of a few dozen people. In the postal boats still delivering mail along the coast. In the small airports scattered across regions where commercial routes would never normally exist. Norway did not adapt to its terrain. It overruled it. But infrastructure of this scale requires money. Enormous, sustained, unusual money, and Norway did not always have it, until something happened beneath the seabed that changed the course of the country forever. Chapter 2. The day the North Sea changed everything. For most of the 20th century, Norway was not rich. It was a working country. Fishermen along the coast, loggers in the interior, shipping companies operating out of Bergen and Oslo, farms clinging to thin strips of arable soil. Comfortable, but not powerful. Stable, but not wealthy. Then, on Christmas Eve 1969, an exploration crew working in the North Sea on a platform called the Ocean Viking confirmed a discovery that had been chased for years. Oil, not a small pocket. A field large enough to change everything. It was named Ekofisk, and it would turn out to be one of the largest oil fields ever found in the North Sea. Over the following decades, more discoveries followed. Statfjord, Troll, Gullfax, Johan Sverdrup. Norway sat on top of one of the most valuable energy reserves in Europe. Most countries in that situation would have done the predictable thing. Cut taxes, raised spending, rewarded the present. Let the future deal with what comes next. Norway didn't. Instead, the country made a series of decisions that, looking back, seem almost uncharacteristically disciplined. First, the state would keep majority ownership of the resource. A national oil company, eventually known as Equinor, would lead development alongside foreign partners. Second, oil would be taxed heavily. Companies operating on the Norwegian continental shelf face a special petroleum tax in addition to the standard corporate rate, bringing the marginal tax on profits to around 78%. Third, and this is the part that changed Norway permanently, the money would not be spent. Most of it would be saved. In 1990, the Norwegian parliament established what would become the Government Pension Fund Global, often referred to simply as the Oil Fund. The idea was simple. Petroleum reserves are finite. Every barrel pulled from the seabed is a barrel that will never be replaced. So if oil is converted into cash, that cash must not be consumed by the generation that happens to be alive when it arrives. It must be invested, held, multiplied, for decades, for centuries, for the people who do not yet exist. The fund made its first deposit in 1996. It now holds more than 1.7 trillion US dollars. It owns roughly 1.5% of every publicly listed company on Earth. It is the largest sovereign wealth fund in the world, and by most measures, the largest single owner of stocks anywhere. And here is where Norway becomes genuinely strange compared to other oil nations. Because if you walk through Oslo, you will not see the fund. There are no monuments to it, no skyline of glass towers built on petroleum money. No district designed to advertise the country's wealth. Norway operates under a self-imposed rule. Each year, the government can spend only the expected real return of the fund, a target set at around 3% of its value. The fund itself, the principal, is not touched. This rule has been broken occasionally during economic crises, but it has held for nearly 3 decades. It is the reason Norway can run advanced public services without the chaos that often follows oil booms. And it is the reason Norwegian wealth feels invisible, because most of it is not in the country. It is spread across more than 8,000 companies in over 60 markets, owning slices of Apple, Microsoft, Nestlé, Toyota, and thousands of others. Norway, in a quiet way, is a partial owner of the global economy, but the discipline does not stop at the financial layer. It continues into how the country chooses to use what it does spend. And that is where you see the second decision that defines modern Norway, the decision not to look rich. Chapter 3. The Law of Jante and the Architecture of Everyday Life. There is a cultural concept in Scandinavia called janteloven, the Law of Jante. It comes from a 1933 novel by the Danish-Norwegian writer Aksel Sandemose, but it describes something older. An unwritten social code shared across much of the Nordic world. The idea is simple, and to outsiders sometimes uncomfortable. You are not better than anyone else. You should not think you are special. You should not show off. In its strictest form, janteloven is restrictive. Modern Norwegians often discuss it critically, but its softer version is woven into everyday life. It shapes how people dress, how they spend, how they speak about success. And it explains something that confuses many first-time visitors. Why a country sitting on more than $1.7 trillion looks, on the street, almost ordinary. In Oslo, the Prime Minister has been seen taking the tram. Members of Parliament cycle to work. CEOs of major companies live in modest houses on quiet streets. Status, in the way it is performed in many other wealthy nations, is largely absent. You can have money in Norway. You just don't display it. The architecture follows the same logic. Norwegian design, especially in the last few decades, has become known internationally for its restraint. Clean lines, natural materials, wood, stone, glass, buildings that respond to landscape rather than dominate it. The Oslo Opera House is a clear example. Completed in 2008 on the city's waterfront, it was designed to be walked on. Its white marble roof slopes directly into the water, and the public is invited to climb it freely. There are no barriers, no velvet ropes, a national cultural monument treated as a public surface. Further along the harbor, the Munch Museum and the Dijkman Library extend the same idea. Cultural institutions placed at the waterfront, accessible on foot, integrated into ordinary life. Even outside the cities, the same restraint appears. Tourist routes through the Norwegian countryside are dotted with viewpoints designed by some of Scandinavia's most respected architects. Small structures, often just a platform, a wall, a frame for the landscape. The point is never the building. The point is what the building lets you see. This is the texture of Norwegian wealth. Not flashy, not minimalist for fashion's sake. Quietly engineered to function, it extends to the welfare system as well. Norwegians pay high taxes by international standards. The top marginal income tax rate can exceed 38%, and value-added tax is 25% on most goods. In return, healthcare is essentially free at the point of use. Tuition at public universities is free for Norwegian and EU students and remains free or very low at many programs for international students. Parental leave can extend up to 49 weeks at full pay, shared between parents. Pensions are guaranteed. The unemployed receive substantial support. This is the visible part of the wealth. Not in skyscrapers, in services, in a system designed so that almost no one falls through the floor. It is not perfect. Norwegians debate immigration, housing prices, regional inequality, and the cost of living constantly. The country has its own pressures and contradictions, but the underlying structure holds. You can be born in a small town above the Arctic Circle and access the same education, the same healthcare, and the same digital infrastructure as someone born in central Oslo. Geography does not decide your life. The state deliberately refuses to let it. And that brings us back to the strangest contradiction of all. Because the country that built this system, the country that funds it, the country that protects it for the future, is also one of the largest oil and gas exporters on Earth. Chapter 4. The paradox of green oil. Norway has built one of the most ambitious environmental profiles of any country in the world. By the end of 2024, more than 88% of all new cars sold in Norway were fully electric. By 2025, the country was on track to become the first nation where electric vehicles dominate the market almost entirely. The capital, Oslo, has electrified large portions of its bus fleet. Ferries crossing the fjords increasingly run on battery power, charging silently between trips. Around 88 to 90% of the country's electricity comes from hydropower, supplemented by wind and a small amount of thermal generation. Domestic emissions per kilowatt-hour produced are among the lowest in Europe, and yet, Norway remains one of the largest exporters of oil and natural gas in Western Europe. It is the largest natural gas supplier to the European Union, providing roughly 30% of the bloc's gas imports following the disruption of Russian supplies. It continues to license new exploration on its continental shelf. It approves new oil and gas fields, including some in Arctic waters. This is the paradox at the center of modern Norway, a country that lives internally, like a clean energy society, and finances that life by selling fossil fuels to everyone else. Norwegian officials describe this position in pragmatic terms. European demand for gas exists. If Norway does not supply it, others will. Norwegian production is among the cleanest in the world per barrel, with strict regulation on flaring and methane emissions. The revenue funds the welfare state and the sovereign wealth fund. Critics, including many Norwegians, see it differently. They argue that no country can credibly lead on climate while expanding fossil fuel extraction, that the moral weight of the oil fund is undermined by the source of its income, that the long Norwegian tradition of respect for nature, friluftsliv, the cultural love of outdoor life, sits uneasily next to a major export industry built on hydrocarbons. The debate is real. It runs through Norwegian elections, court cases, and public discourse. In 2020, a coalition of environmental groups took the Norwegian state to court, arguing that new Arctic oil licenses violated constitutional environmental protections. The case was lost in the Norwegian Supreme Court but was later examined by the European Court of Human Rights. These tensions are not hidden. They are part of how the country sees itself. Norway is not a clean story. It is a complicated one, told honestly by a country that understands the contradictions and continues to negotiate them in public. What it is not is performance. There is no national branding campaign claiming environmental purity. There is no attempt to disguise the source of the wealth. The fund publishes its holdings. Petroleum revenue is reported transparently. The oil platforms are visible on the horizon, lit at night against Black Sea. The country lives with its own paradox in plain sight. And in a way, that openness is part of why the system survives. Because the wealth is not built on a myth. It is built on a resource that everyone can name, taxed at rates everyone can verify, invested through a fund whose every transaction is recorded. There is something almost old-fashioned about it. A country running its fortune like a careful family, earning, saving, investing, refusing to spend the principal, and arguing publicly about whether the source of the income is still acceptable. But to understand how this culture of restraint actually feels, you have to leave the cities. You have to go where Norway has been Norway for far longer than oil has existed. Chapter 5. The country beyond the cities. Most travelers to Norway see Oslo, Bergen, perhaps a fjord cruise, and leave. But the country that defines Norway is the country between those points. The Lofoten Islands sit above the Arctic Circle, off the northwestern coast. Jagged peaks of granite and gneiss rise straight from the ocean, with small fishing villages tucked into the protected inlets between them. The traditional houses are painted deep red, rorbur, originally built on stilts above the water for fishermen working the winter cod season. Many are still in use, some converted into accommodation, some still active as fishing cabins. In summer, the sun does not set here for weeks. In winter, it does not rise for weeks. The northern lights appear with a regularity that becomes almost ordinary to the people who live with them. Cod fishing remains a working industry, not a heritage display. The dried cod from Lofoten, stock fish, has been exported from this region since the Viking Age and is still shipped today to Italy, Portugal, and West Africa. This is not a museum. It is a place that continues to do what it has always done, supported now by infrastructure that was unimaginable a generation ago. Move further north, into Finnmark, and the landscape opens into the wide tundra of the Sami homeland. The Sami are the indigenous people of northern Scandinavia, with their own languages, parliament, and legal protections. Reindeer herding is still practiced, particularly in the eastern parts of Finnmark, with herds moving seasonally between coastal and inland pastures. The relationship between the Norwegian state and Sami communities has been, historically, difficult. A long policy of forced assimilation in the 19th and 20th centuries caused real damage. That history is now openly acknowledged. A Truth and Reconciliation Commission delivered its findings in 2023, formally documenting the harm done by the assimilation policies and recommending a path forward. Sami language education, broadcasting, and political representation are now constitutionally protected. It is not a closed chapter, but it is a chapter being addressed in public. Move south again into the Hardanger and Sogn regions of western Norway, and the landscape changes once more. These are the apple-growing valleys, where steep slopes facing the fjord create unexpected microclimates suitable for fruit, despite the latitude. Cider production has revived in recent years, with several regional producers earning international recognition. In the interior, the high plateaus, the Vaida, stretch for hundreds of kilometers, almost empty of people. Hardangervidda, the largest mountain plateau in northern Europe, is home to one of the largest wild reindeer populations on the continent. In winter, it is one of the harshest landscapes in Europe. In summer, it becomes a vast network of hiking trails with simple cabins maintained by the Norwegian Trekking Association, DNT, where any member can stay for a small fee. This is Friluftsliv in practice. The cultural conviction that being outside in nature is not a luxury or a hobby. It is a normal part of life. School children spend regular time outdoors in nearly any weather. Companies offer outdoor team activities as a default. Families plan weekends around trails, lakes, and ski tracks rather than shopping districts. The Norwegian word for nature, is used so casually in daily conversation that visitors sometimes notice its frequency before they understand its weight. It is not exotic in Norway. It is home. And this is perhaps the deepest layer of what makes Norwegian wealth different. Because the money in the fund, the tunnels through the mountains, the electric ferries, the welfare state, all of it serves something the country never lost. A relationship with the land. A belief that life is supposed to be lived in close contact with it. The wealth did not replace that. It protected it. Chapter 6. What Norway actually teaches. Step back from the details and a pattern emerges. Norway is not a model that can be easily copied. Its conditions are specific. A small population, just under 5.6 million people. A massive resource discovery at exactly the right moment in history. A pre-existing culture of social trust, transparency, and relatively low corruption. A political system already accustomed to long-term thinking. Most countries that strike oil do not become Norway. Many become poorer afterward, not richer, a phenomenon economists call the resource curse, where a sudden flood of commodity wealth distorts the economy, weakens institutions, and concentrates power in a small elite. Norway escaped that fate, not by accident, by choosing, again and again, to do the patient thing instead of the dramatic thing, to save instead of spend, to invest instead of consume, to distribute instead of concentrate, to build infrastructure where the math made no obvious sense, to tax heavily and deliver visibly, to dress like everyone else, to park the prime minister's car next to the postman's, to argue openly and continuously about whether the country is doing the right thing. That last point may be the most important. Norway is not a finished project. The oil debate is unresolved. Housing prices in Oslo and Bergen have risen sharply, putting strain on younger generations. Immigration policy is contested. Regional inequality between South and North persists. The cost of living is among the highest in Europe. Norwegians complain about all of this regularly, but the underlying machinery keeps working. The trains run, the tunnels open, the fund grows, the welfare state delivers, the mountains stay reachable. There is no single moment in Norway that explains it. No monument, no skyline, no spectacle that you can point to and say, "There, that is the wealth." It is in the road that someone built so a village of 200 people would not be cut off in winter. It is in the school in Tromsø that operates at the same standard as a school in Oslo. It is in the ferry that departs on time to an island most travelers will never visit. It is in a fund quietly compounding for the children of citizens who have not yet been born. A country is rich, almost embarrassingly rich, and it has decided deliberately not to look it. Not because Norwegians are uniquely modest, not because the country lacks ambition, but because the wealth was understood from the beginning as something that did not belong to the present. It belonged to the land that produced it, to the future that would inherit it, to the children who would be asked eventually to carry the country forward without the oil that built it. And so the money was put away, and the country was built around the land instead of on top of it. Tunnels through mountains, bridges across fjords, ferries to islands, trains through plateaus, schools and villages no one outside Norway has ever heard of. A welfare system designed to catch almost everyone. A fund designed to outlast almost everything. This is what wealth looks like when it is not trying to be seen. Quiet, functional, patient, distributed across a population small enough to know itself and a landscape vast enough to humble anyone who tries to dominate it. Norway never needed to show off, because it understood earlier than most that the loudest part of being rich is also the most easily lost, and what it built instead, slowly, deliberately, almost invisibly, is something far harder to lose. A country that works for the people who live in it now, and for the ones who will come after. This is Norway, the richest country that never needed to prove it.
Yeah.